Radhe. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parigashara Stotarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Fanrachar Bhivti Fanrachar Jaguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Tagore Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter number 4, Text number 5. Rajavacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagnasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Hare Katha Yata Katham. Rajavacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagnasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Hare Katha Yata Katham. Rajavacha Samichinam Vacho Brahman Sarvagnasya Tavanaga Tamo Visiryate Mayam Hare Katha Yata Katham. Word for word translation. Raja Uvacha, the king said, Samichinam, perfectly right. Vachaha, speeches. Brahman, O learned Brahmana. Sarvagnasya, one who knows all. Tava, your. Anaga, without any contamination. Tamaha, the darkness of ignorance. Visiryate, gradually disappearing. Mayam, unto me. Hare, of the Lord. Kata yataha, as you are speaking. Katham, topics. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit said, O learned Brahmana, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Lord. Purport. The practical experience of Maharaj Parikshit is disclosed herein, revealing that transcendental topics of the Lord act like injections when received by the sincere devotee from a person who is perfectly uncontaminated by material tinges. In other words, reception of the messages of Srimad Bhagavatam from professional men heard by a karma khandiya audience never acts miraculously as stated here. Devotional hearing of the messages of the Lord is not like hearing ordinary topics. Therefore, the action will be felt by the sincere hearer by experience of the gradual disappearance of ignorance. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tasyete katita hyartha prakashante mahatmanaha. Svetasvara Upanishad 6.23. When a hungry man is given food to eat, he feels satisfaction of hunger and the pleasure of dining simultaneously. Thus, he does not have to ask whether he has actually been fed or not. The crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurumritam Yena Tasmei Shri Guruve Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class today. So we continue our discussion from the 4th chapter of Canto 2 titled The Process of Creation. And in today's verse is spoken by Maharaj Parikshit. He's speaking this to Sukadeva Goswami. So I'll just read the translation again. Maharaj Parikshit said, O learned Brahmana, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Lord. So in the purport today, few points Prabhupada is mentioning in regard to hearing about Krishna. So the first thing Prabhupada is mentioning is that topics about Krishna or Krishna Katha, when we hear about Krishna, it acts like a transcendental medicine or transcendental injection that will help us cure us of our ignorance, cure us from the disease of mature existence. Over the past few weeks, I've been listening to my Guru Maharaj's lectures, which he's been giving during this pandemic times when everyone's in lockdown. And in the first few lectures of my Guru Maharaj, I was listening. He was comparing this pandemic of COVID to the disease of mature existence. So he was saying how the actual disease, the greatest disease, is the disease of mature existence, that we're stuck here in this mature world, and we're stuck in this mature body, and having this body is like being overcome by a disease. So what is the meaning of disease? Disease is something that puts us in an unnatural state of existence. So as we all know, the nature of the soul is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. It's eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. But when we come to this mature world, when we get overcome by the disease of mature existence, we get put into a body which is temporary and which at one time will die. So it's the opposite of Sach and Chit and Ananda. So full of bliss, but in the mature world when we come, it's full of misery, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. And our lifespan is temporary, only we stay for a certain number of years. Then we die and then we're forced to accept a new body. And spiritual body is full of knowledge, but in this mature body, we're full of ignorance. We can't remember our original identity as spirit soul. Unless a devotee of Krishna comes and enlightens us, we'll be stuck in ignorance. So my Guru Maharaj was mentioning that the greatest disease or the actual disease of life is this disease of mature existence. And what is the vaccination of this disease of mature existence? My Guru Maharaj, he was quoting from the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, a verse by, again, Maharaj Parikshit himself. In that verse, Maharaj Parikshit, it's the famous verse, Nivritta Tarse Upagirma. In that verse, Maharaj Parikshit is explaining how the cure, the vaccination, the injection for curing the disease of mature existence is hearing the topics about Krishna, is hearing Krishna Katha. That's the actual vaccination that will cure one from this disease of mature existence. Now, persons out there, they're so much overcome by ignorance, they don't even realize that actually they're suffering in this mature world. Like many times you hear people, they'll say that, God gave us these bodies to enjoy. But actually the Shastras explain that actually this body is a punishment. This body is meant to give us suffering, not enjoyment. And Prahlad Maharaj, he explains this point in his prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. So next week we're going to celebrate Nrsimha Chaturdasi. So in his prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, one verse, Prahlad Maharaj, he explains about the nature of mature life, nature of mature happiness. In this verse, Prahlad Maharaj, he first starts by saying, Kutra Sisa Shruti Sukha Mriga Trishni Rupa. In the first line, he's saying that Where is there happiness in this world? The so-called happiness which everyone is hankering for in this material world is just like a mirage in the desert. And Shruti Sukha. Shruti means hearing and Sukha means pleasure. So this so-called happiness, it just sounds nice. But in actuality, there's no substance. It's just like a mirage. People say, okay, if you do this, you do that, you'll be happy, you'll feel fulfilled. So just in words, just in hearing, it sounds very nice, it sounds very pleasurable. But when you actually do it, you realize actually it's nothing. It's just a mirage. It's not actually happiness. Just momentary happiness you might get, but then it fades away. Now in the second line, which is in relation to this, Prahlad Maharaji explains. So first line says, Kutra sisa suti sukha mrigatrisni rupa kwedam kalevaram asesa rujam viroha. In the second line, Prahlad Maharaji says that as far as this material body is concerned, it's simply designed to just give us misery. It's simply designed to give us suffering. And this body is just a source of all different types of diseases. Now, when we hear this, we might say that, Prahlad Maharaj, he's exaggerating a bit. But actually, if you contemplate on this second line of Prahlad Maharaj's prayer, you will realize that actually whatever Prahlad Maharaj is saying is actually factual. This body is actually meant to give us suffering. This body is actually a bag full of newer and newer diseases. Like if you think about it, at any time, every day, every moment, there's actually some part of our body giving us difficulty. Sometimes, we wake up, our eyes will be burning. Sometimes we'll have a headache. If not a headache, maybe we strained our leg muscle or our arm muscle. Sometimes our back will be itching. Sometimes we'll be feeling very tired. So sometimes we'll have stomach ache, sometimes problem with the ear, sometimes problem with the nose full of mucus, problem with the throat, we'll have a sore throat. So at any point of time, one particular part of the body is giving us some kind of distress. At no particular time, if you think about it, the body is in perfect condition. So, and in terms of life, the Shastras explain that miseries will come to this material body of ours in three different directions. One is through the body itself, through ourselves. One is from other living entities. And the third is through natural disasters. So from this, the Shastras explain that this actual material body that we're given, inside which we, the soul, is entrapped, is actually meant to give us suffering. Is actually a disease. And we have to get cured of this disease. And the way to get cured of this unnatural state of existence is by taking the vaccine, is by taking the medicine, or as Prabhupada is explaining in today's purport, is by taking the injection of Krishna Katha, is by taking the injection of hearing topics about Krishna. So that's the first thing Prabhupada is mentioning. And secondly, Prabhupada is mentioning in today's purport that the proper way to take this medicine. So generally, whenever we have a certain type of disease or illness, we go to a doctor, the doctor gives us some medicine, but there'll be some prescriptions, some guidelines on how to take the medicine. If you take the medicine properly, according to the directions of the doctor, then you'll get the actual effect. So in the same way, Prabhupada is explaining that this medicine, injection of Krishna Katha, should be taken from a speaker who is pure in consciousness, who is pure in heart, and not from just a professional Bhagavatam reciter, who's simply just reciting just to earn money, just to engage in mature affairs. And Prabhupada is saying the audience also needs to be qualified. So both the speaker and the audience needs to be qualified. If these two conditions are met, then the medicine will actually have effect. So on one side, the speaker, he needs to be pure in heart. He shouldn't have any ulterior motives. He shouldn't be just speaking Bhagavatam just to earn a living. And secondly, from the audience side, they should be very sincere in hearing about Krishna. They should be very submissive and they should have faith in the messages of the Bhagavatam. Then there will be actual effect. In a few purports earlier on, in this chapter, I think it was on Tuesday, Toshan Krishna Prabhu, he was reading that purport, or I think it was him. In that purport, Prabhupada is explaining the same point about persons hearing from professional Bhagavatam reciters. In that purport, Prabhupada is explaining that one can attend these Bhagavad Saftars of these professional Bhagavatam reciters. But even after hearing Bhagavatam from them, for 700 years, still one won't make even a step of advancement in spiritual life. So when we hear something like that, it sounds like Prabhupada is being very heavy, or Prabhupada is, exaggerating a bit, or Prabhupada might be being a bit, we Hare Krishnas, we're being a bit fanatical, Only if someone comes and attends a proper class by a Hare Krishna devotee, only they'll make advancement. But if you go attend all these Bhagavad Saptas by these professional Bhagavatam reciters, your Swamiji, he's saying that even after listening for 700 years, we won't make a step of advancement. He's just, he's being too heavy, he's being fanatical. But actually, if you contemplate on it and think about it through the viewpoint of the Shastras, actually Prabhupada is not being fanatical, he's being realist, he's being scientific, and out of compassion, Prabhupada is telling like this. Just like, we'll go back to the previous example of someone being overcome by disease, and then he goes to a doctor, and the doctor gives him some medicine. Now, only if the person who's overcome by this disease, if he properly follows the prescription the doctor has given, okay, you take this medicine this many times during the day, you take it with some water along with your food, and the doctor gives him some guidelines. Only if the patient very sincerely and very attentively follows all the instructions of the doctor in taking the medicine, only then will the medicine have effect. But if the patient just thinks, I can just take this medicine whichever way I like, instead of putting the tablets into my mouth, I'll put it into my ear, and I'll get the same benefit. And if the doctor comes and tells you that, what you're doing is wrong, you can't put the medicine in your ear, you can't put the medicine up your nose, you have to put the medicine in your mouth along with water and along with some food, and you have to do it 3 times a day, and you have to do it for so many days. Only then will the medicine have effect. Now if the patient starts arguing back, no, you're being very fanatical, Mr. Doctor, why are you being so strict, why are you being so heavy? I can put the medicine through whichever hole I like. It's still going to go to my body. I can put the medicine through my ear, I can put the medicine through my nose or any other hole. It'll still have the same effect. And if the doctor argues back and says, no, this won't work, even by putting 700 medicines for 700 years through your ears or nose, you won't have any benefit. Now, is the doctor being fanatical? Is the doctor being dogmatic? No, the doctor is just being scientific. That's the actual fact. Only if you take the medicine through the proper way of taking the medicine with some water, with some food, this many times a day, then only you have the proper effect. So in the same way, if we compare that analogy to what Prabhupada is saying, we can understand that actually Prabhupada is not being dogmatic, Prabhupada is not being fanatical, he's not exaggerating. He's just being scientific, he's just telling us the facts. Just like there's a proper method of taking medicine, you take it through the mouth, you take it like this. So in the same way, there's a proper scientific process or method in taking this medicine of Krishna Katha. And that's what Prabhupada is trying to explain. And when the doctor says, no, don't do it like this won't be good, this won't heal you, the doctor is saying it out of compassion. Because the doctor understands, if you take the medicine through your ear, if you shove the medicine up your nose, nothing will happen. No benefit will happen, and you just cause more distress to yourself. So in the same way, Prabhupada, out of compassion, he is making these heavy statements. He feels compassionate for all the fallen conditioned souls, seeing them being misled by so many bogus swamis, bogus professional Bhagavatam reciters, and so-called spiritualists and religious men. As is predicted in the 12th canto Bhagavatam. 12th canto Bhagavatam predicts that in Kali Yuga, there will be so many imposter so-called yogis and professional saintly persons who externally they'll act saintly or religious, but actually their whole consciousness is just immersed in mature existence. So Prabhupada, out of compassion for the general mass of people, Prabhupada is thinking, how all these innocent persons, they're being misled by all these personalities. So in that mood, Prabhupada is making these heavy statements that even if you go on hearing Bhagavatam from these professional reciters, you won't make a step of advancement, even after 700 years. And another quote from Shastra, Ghanshyam Prabhu was mentioning last night in his Chaitanya Charitamrita class, one verse from the Puranas that explains that when one hears about Krishna from the mouth of a Vaishnava, from the mouth of a non-devotee, then it's just like taking milk which has been touched by the lips of a snake. When a snake comes and drinks some milk, the poison of the snake gets left behind in the milk. And if you take that milk, the poison will go into the body and it will have a negative effect on us. So in the same way the Shastras explain that the same Krishna Katha, if we hear from the mouths of non-devotees, instead of helping us grow in spiritual life, it will have the opposite effect. That's why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Krishna himself, he says, Mayavadi Bhasya Sunle Hoya Sarvanas. That the same message of the Shastras, if you hear from the lips of a Mayavadi, then it will cause doom to your spiritual life. Why? Because Krishna, although it's the same Bhagavatam, although it's the same holy name, Krishna can choose to be present or appear through his holy name or through Bhagavatam. When non-devotees, like Mayavadis, when they recite Bhagavatam or recite Shastras, completely interpreting everything, as we're hearing in the Chaitanya Charitamrita classes, how all these Mayavadis, they used to change the meanings to put forward their own impersonal understanding. Actually, there's no God, there's no Supreme Personal Godhead. The perfection of life is to merge into Brahman and become God. So they'll twist the meanings of all the Sanskrit verses of the Shastras. And because they're doing like that, they're causing the greatest offense to the Supreme Lord. And because of that aparad to the Supreme Personal Godhead, whatever they speak, it's not actually Krishna. Krishna can choose not to appear in the Bhagavatam or in the holy name they're chanting. Why? Because of their offenses they're committing against Namaprabhu, because of the offenses they're committing against Srimad Bhagavatam, which is non-different from Krishna. So that's the second point Prabhupada is mentioning today's verse. Now, going back to the first point, Prabhupada is mentioning about how Krishna Katha, it's like a transcendental medicine, it's like a transcendental vaccine to help us overcome this disease or this virus of material existence. As we've been hearing in the CC classes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's instructing us that Bharata Bhumite Hoile Manushya Janmayar Janma Sartakakari Para Upakara. That first I order all of you to first cure yourself of this disease of material existence. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is ordering each and every one of us, first you take this vaccine of Krishna Katha, and first you cure yourself of the disease of material existence, and first you become healthy. And then what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says? Then he says, then you go and give this medicine, this vaccination against the disease of material existence to all the other disease-conditioned souls out there in society. So both things we need to do. So obviously by Prabhupada's mercy, by the mercy of devotees, we have all received this vaccination of Krishna Katha, and we're all very regularly and nicely taking it every day, daily. Now it's also our duty to give this vaccination to others. Just like, say someone is overcome by some disease like COVID or something, and then another person comes with the vaccination and we're really suffering, overcome by his disease, and that person gives us he finds the cure and gives it to us, and then we become cured and then we're healthy. But then we realize that the neighbors in our same apartment block, they also have the same disease. Now because we've experienced how it's like to be in this particular disease, to be in a particular illness, we can feel the pain that our neighbors are feeling. So naturally, the person, or we'll feel that, okay, I still have so many more, tablets of this medicine, let me go give to my neighbors so they can also get cured. So that's the natural instinct any human being would have. So that's the same thing with spiritual life. In one verse from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that the yogi, this transcendentalist, he should compare himself to all other living entities and see the true equality of all living entities by seeing the equality of happiness and distress. Meaning, Krishna is explaining this verse in start of Bhagavad Gita. He's explaining that one should contemplate when he sees someone else suffering, the yogi, he should think back of how he used to suffer also. And by thinking like this, one can get the realization that just as I was suffering so much before, suddenly these conditions, this person who is suffering now, he's also suffering just like me. In that way, one will be overcome by compassion. And that way, one can see the true equality of all beings. And the purport of this verse of Gita, Prabhupada says, and that's why it's the duty of the yogis, that when he sees others suffering, just like how he used to suffer before, then naturally, overcome by compassion, he goes out and he shares this medicine of Krishna Katha with them. And naturally, although one might be cured, still there's a chance that when one is going out, he might get overcome by the disease again, because there's so many other persons out there with disease. That's why Prabhupada just says, yes, we go out, we do preaching, we do book distribution, we do Harinam, we go and do outreach, but at the same time, we ourselves need to be careful in following all the rules and regulative principles very strictly, so we ourselves are safe from being contaminated by Maya. Just like if you go to the hospital, all the doctors and nurses, they'll have so many precautionary methods to protect themselves of catching the disease. Although they themselves are healthy, still so many diseased persons are coming to them and they don't want to get contaminated. So they'll wear gloves, they'll wear a face mask and so many different things. So in the same way, we're healthy now, but at the same time we need to very strictly have good high sadhana and stay closely in the sangha of devotees, and in this way protect ourselves from again falling to Maya. And at the same time, we go out and give this mercy to others, give this vaccination of Krishna Katha to others. Now, next thing Prabhupada says in this purport, that if you take this vaccination of Krishna Katha, one of the effects that will come is that one will overcome the ignorance one is overcome by. So this is one of the effects. And we see the same thing in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita we see Arjuna was put into illusion by Krishna's arrangement. And then he asked Krishna, what should he do? Then Krishna, he speaks transcendental knowledge. And then at the end of the Gita, Arjuna displays the effect of hearing Krishna Katha. At the end of the Gita, in the final chapter, Arjuna says, Nasta moha smriti labda tvat prasadan maya chuta stito asmi gata sandeha karisye vachanam tava. Arjuna is telling Krishna at the end of the Gita, Nasta moha. Moha means illusion, ignorance. Nasta. Now by hearing this nectar coming from your mouth, my illusion, my ignorance is going. Nasta moha smriti labda. And now my memory of transcendental knowledge is now reinstated back. Tvat prasadam mayachuta. It is all due to your mercy, O Krishna. Stito asmi gata sandeha karisye vachanam stava. Now I'm fixed and determined. Now I know what is the right thing to do, what is not the right thing to do. And now I am ready to act according to your instructions. So this is one of the effects of hearing Krishna Katha. And this is what Maharaj Parikshit is saying in today's verse. That, O learned Brahmana, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance. So when we hear Krishna Katha, the darkness of ignorance, which is caused by us being entrapped in this material body, will slowly start to go away. And the same effect that Maharaj Parikshit is describing in today's verse, we see the same thing in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was in ignorance, then he hears from Krishna, and then at the end of the Gita, Arjuna again, he says, okay, now by hearing you, my ignorance is gone, now I'm ready to act according to instructions. Now in terms of Krishna Katha, or hearing about Krishna, there's different types, different ways we can hear about Krishna. So one is, Prabhupada said that one type of Krishna Katha is Bhagavad Gita. So one type of Krishna Katha is where Krishna, he himself is speaking. So that's one form of Krishna Katha. The second type of Krishna Katha is Srimad Bhagavatam, where other devotees are talking about the pastimes of Krishna. So this is another form of Krishna Katha. And there's no difference between these two. There's no difference between Krishna speaking himself. There's no difference between the words coming out of the lotus mouth of Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita compared to words coming from the mouths of devotees glorifying the pastimes and the qualities of Lord. Both types of Krishna Katha are the same. Both will have the same effect. Another type of hearing about Krishna is by chanting Krishna's holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, as we all studied, that there is no difference between Krishna's holy name, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's name, fame. So in the same way, because there's no difference between the words coming out of Krishna's mouth to his pastimes, to his holy name, the same effect we'll get by chanting the holy name, by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So whichever of these processes we take shelter of, we'll get the same effect of overcoming this virus, this disease of mature existence, and developing love for Krishna. At the end of the purport, Prabhupada, he gives a summary of one verse from the 11th canto of Bhagavatam. When a hungry man is given food to eat, he feels satiation of hunger and the pleasure of dining simultaneously. Thus, he does not have to ask whether he has actually been fed or not. The crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. So in this verse that Prabhupada is quoting from the 11th canto Bhagavatam, it's a metaphor that explains the effects that a devotee will feel when he takes through the process of hearing Krishna Katha. So this analogy, it compares this to a hungry man eating food. So when someone is very hungry, with every mouthful of prasad he takes, he feels strength, he feels physical strength, nourishment. And second effect is that he feels pleasure, he feels blissful. Wow, such nice sabji, such nice puris, such nice halwa, what a nice drink, what a nice pakora, what a nice chutney. So he's slowly, the hungry man, he's starting to feel more and more strength. And he also starts feeling pleasure when he's experiencing, when he's tasting all the different flavors in the prasad. And the third benefit is, before he started taking the prasad, his stomach was giving him a lot of pain. He's been fasting for so long, and there's this pain in his stomach out of hunger. Now with every mouthful of prasad the hungry man takes, the hunger slowly starts to dissipate. Slowly, until he becomes full. So in the same way, the Bhagavatam explains in the 11th canto, the same effect will happen when we take to hearing about Krishna. Number one, the hunger going away, that's compared to our attachment for mature enjoyment, to our hankering for mature pleasure. As we hear about Krishna more and more, either by reading Gita, by attending Bhagavatam class, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, or by chanting the holy name, we'll experience that our taste for mature enjoyment, our mature attachments will slowly go away. And second effect, just like the hungry man, he feels pleasure in taking very nice prasad. In the same way, when we perform devotional service, when we perform hearing about Krishna, we will naturally feel very blissful and joyful. And all of us have had this experience, that we come to the temple, we sing and dance in front of deities, and it's so fun, it's so blissful. And when we come and attend some nice Bhagavatam class, nice Chaitanya Charitamrita class, it's so nice to just come and sit and hear. And the third effect given is nourishment. So just like the hungry man, he feels great strength and nourishment. So in the same way, the Bhagavatam explains that when one hears about Krishna and engages in devotional service, one will be spiritually nourished by getting direct realization, by getting transcendental realization, that yes, whatever the Shastra is saying is right, and this is actually true, this is actually very scientific, and this increases the faith of the practitioner, and in that way the practitioner, the bhakti yogi, is nourished. So this is one very nice analogy given in the 11th canto that Prabhupada is quoting. And Prabhupada is saying, just like the hungry man, when he eats, the hunger goes away and he starts feeling more pleasure simultaneously. Thus, he does not have to ask whether he has actually been fed or not. So Prabhupada is trying to make this point, that we can judge whether we're making spiritual advancement or not by ourselves. We don't need to ask anyone. Just like Prabhupada is saying, as you take food, you yourself notice that your hunger is going away. You yourself notice that you're feeling pleasure. You yourself notice that you're feeling nourishment. So in the same way Prabhupada is explaining, as you go on hearing about Krishna, as you go on engaging in devotional service, you yourself will notice how your mature attachments are going down, and how your taste for Krishna Katha, how your taste for Krishna consciousness actually is increasing, how you're feeling so much more happier compared to before, and how you're feeling so much more spiritually nourished. So you don't have to, it's not like a mystery. You yourself can practically realize how this process is actually working, how this process is benefiting you. So from this we can see how Krishna consciousness is actually very scientific. There's no question of blind faith. It's not dogma, it's not, as we were explaining early on, sometimes persons, they accuse us of being fanatical or dogmatic, but actually, if you think about it through a proper perspective, actually whatever is mentioned in the Shastra, whatever we're practicing is very scientific. We ourselves can practically experience all these things in our own life. So it's not us who are being fanatical or who are being dogmatic. It's actually the persons out there who are accusing us. You see many different, as we were discussing before, many different yogis and so-called swamis, they'll say, you can follow any path you like, you can worship Durga, you can worship Ganesh, whichever deity you feel more connected to in your heart, whichever deity your soul longs for, you can worship. In the end, all paths will lead to the same goal. Now, is that actually factual? Like Prabhupada said, if you go to the airport, and if you want to go to London, only if you purchase a ticket to London, only then can you go to London. If you purchase a ticket to India, how will you go to London? So different airplanes, they go to different destinations. Different airplane tickets, they lead you to different destinations. So in the same way, how can you say all paths lead to the same goal? And when we say that actually, no, only if you worship Krishna, you go back to Goloka, they accuse us of being fanatic, or they accuse us of being very narrow-minded. But actually, it's not us who are being dogmatic, it's not us who are being fanatic, it's actually them who are being fanatical. We're just saying the facts, just like if someone says, if you catch the plane to Los Angeles, you go to Los Angeles. If you catch the plane to go to India, you go to India. Is he being fanatical? Is he being dogmatic? No, he's just saying the facts. He's just saying things as they are. He's being scientific. And on the other hand, that person who says that all flights, they lead to the same destination, that person is the one who's an illusion. It's that person who's fanatical, it's that person who's dogmatic. So it's not us, the Hare Krishna devotees, it's not us who are following in the footsteps of the Parampara, following the Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavad Gita strictly. It's not us who are being dogmatic. We're just being scientific. We're just being realist. It's actually the persons out there, the bogus yogis and so-called spiritualists who say that you can just chant any mantra, worship any deity, you will attain the same destination. It's actually them who are being fanatical. It's them who are speaking the untruth, who are making dogmatic statements. And one more thing we can talk about before we stop is we can take some inspiration from Vrindavan, from the Vrajvasis, of what should be a proper mood in when we hear Krishna Katha. One time, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, he was asked this question, that Maharaj, if you were to describe Krishna consciousness in just one word, what word would you choose? And Maharaj said, he chose the word absorption. So one word to describe Krishna consciousness, Maharaj used the word absorption. And this principle of absorption, like the actual term itself, Krishna consciousness means that you're conscious of Krishna. So at the highest stage of Krishna consciousness, one is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. And this we can see through the practical example of the Vrajvasis. And it's very important for us to implement this principle of absorbing ourselves in Krishna Katha in our lives, because that's what life is like in the spiritual world. Unless we practice absorbing ourselves in Krishna Katha now, then how will we fit in the spiritual world, where all the Vrajvasis, all the devotees there, are fully immersed in hearing and chanting of Krishna? So if we go to Vrindavan, if we open up Krishna book, we'll see that there's different types of devotees of Krishna. There's the younger cowherd boys who are like Krishna's mates, the younger gopas. There's the elderly gopas. And then number 3, there's the younger gopis who have a conjugal relationship with Krishna. And then finally there's the elder gopis who have the Vatsalya Bhav for Krishna. So we can go through each one of these 4 different types of devotees of Krishna in Vrindavan that we hear about or read about in Krishna book, and see how all these different residents of Vrindavan, they're completely 100% engaged in hearing about Krishna. So let's start with the gopas, the younger gopas. So it's mentioned that when the younger gopas, they would go to the forests of Vrindavan, they would be going, singing and chanting about Krishna's glories. And when they would return back to Vrindavan, they'll be again singing and chanting Krishna's glories. Every day Krishna would kill one demon or more. And as they would return back from the forest, Bhagavatam explains that, Krishna book explains, that all the gopas, they will be very blissfully chanting different songs, poetry, about how Krishna today, he killed this demon like this and like that. And then when the gopas would come back to their houses, then they would go up to their parents and tell their parents, Mom, Dad, you know what happened today? Today, this big demon, Aghasura, came, and Krishna went into his mouth, and we were all swallowed by this big snake, and Krishna saved us. Oh, Mom, Dad, what happened today? Today, this big Bakasura demon came and Krishna killed him like this. So every day when they would come back, as they would come back, they would be singing glories of Krishna, and when they would come enter their houses, their respective houses, they would go narrate what particular pastime Krishna did to their parents. So in this way, the younger Gopas, 24 hours a day, they were engaged in Krishna Katha. Remember before we were explaining how different types of Krishna Katha. One type of Krishna Katha is where a devotee is talking about the pastimes of Krishna himself. Another type of Krishna Katha is where Krishna, he himself is speaking. So the younger Gopas, either they would directly be hearing the nectar coming from Krishna's mouth, either they directly engage in conversations with Krishna, or when they're not physically present with Krishna, they'll be talking about Krishna's pastimes amongst themselves or amongst their parents and their relatives at home. So in this way, the younger Gopas, 24 hours a day, they're engaged in hearing and chanting about Krishna. And then we go to younger Gopis. They're also 100% engaged in hearing and chanting about Krishna. There's so many verses actually are there in 10th canto where the Gopis are describing the glories of Krishna's beauty or Krishna's pastimes amongst themselves. When Krishna would be gone to the forest and the Gopis would be bereft of his association, amongst themselves they would start talking about the glories of Krishna's beauty, Krishna's pastimes. So many beautiful verses are there in Bhagavatam where they're describing Krishna's beauty. How Krishna, he entered the forest, with a peacock feather, with a blue lotus flower. He'll be wearing yellow garments with a Vaijayanti garland. How all of his cowherd boyfriends will be singing his glories, and how he'll be putting the marks of his lotus footprint on the ground. In this way, all the younger Gopis, all the time they're engaged in hearing and chanting with Krishna. Either they're directly be having conversations with Krishna, or amongst themselves they're hearing chanting about Krishna. And same thing we see with the elder Gopas. Either they directly talk to Krishna, or when Krishna is not there, amongst themselves they also talk about Krishna. Just like we see after Govardhan Puja, after the Govardhan Leela, after Krishna, he held up Govardhan Hill for 7 days. Then all the cowherd men, they get together and they have a discussion. And what discussion they're having? They're having a discussion about Krishna's pastimes again. That this boy Krishna, there's something special about him. And there's like a whole chapter in Krishna book, whole chapter in Bhagavatam, where the elderly cowherd Gopas, they're going through sequentially all the pastimes Krishna has done through childhood. When this Krishna was very small, he killed Putana. And then straight after that, Trinavarta came and he killed Trinavarta. Then he killed Sakatasura. And then he broke those 2 Yamuna Arjuna trees. In this way they go on, discussing all the pastimes that Krishna has done. And Bhagavatam explains, the Acharyas explain, that many times this would happen amongst the elderly cowherd Gopas. Whenever Krishna will do some miraculous thing, immediately all the cowherd men will come together and discuss, this boy, there's something special about him. How could he do this? How could he do that? And then Nanda Maharaj, he will pacify them that, don't worry, when Krishna, he got his name-giving ceremony, Garga Muni told us that this boy, Krishna, he'll be like Narayan. Not Narayan, he'll be like Narayan. So he'll have similar potencies like Narayan, which means, he's maybe some kind of demigod empowered with special potency. So in this way, Nanda Maharaj will pacify all the elderly cowherd men by telling them, no, he's not God, he's just like Narayan. He's been empowered by Narayan to do some miraculous things like lifting Govardhan Hill or killing so many demons. So in this way, the elder Gopas, they're also always engaged in hearing and chanting about Krishna. And then there's the elder Gopis. So at the start of Krishna book, we see how the elder Gopis, they would always come and complain to Mother Yasoda about different naughty activities that little Krishna, baby Krishna had been doing. And Prabhupada explains that actually, they're not actually angry at Krishna, they secretly enjoy Krishna coming to the house and stealing and doing all of his stealing activities in their houses. They're just using this so-called complaints to Mother Yasoda as an excuse to talk about Krishna. So they just feel bliss in talking about Krishna. So that's why they're just using these activities of Krishna as an excuse to come and complain to Mother Yasoda. Also they're thinking that so many nice transcendental activities Krishna is doing, So Mother Yasoda, she's missing out. Mother Yasoda, she's in her own house. She doesn't know what all amazing pastimes his son is doing in our houses. So let us go and reveal these nice pastimes to Mother Yasoda. So this is how Sadhu Sangha should be. When we read some nice pastime, when we hear some nice points in hearing in a class or in reading the Shastras, Vaishnavas, they get together and discuss, Prabhu, what did you read today? What did you hear? And then one Vaishnava will share, okay, I was listening to this Prabhu, he's mentioned this, today I read this one nice pastime, today I found this one very nice verse or sloka. And in this way, Vaishnavas, they get together and they discuss about Krishna Katha. As we were hearing about yesterday from Ghanshampur about the 6 Goswamis Vrindavan, they used to get together and hear and talk about Krishna. So the same thing we see in Vrindavan. With the elder gopis, they were thinking that, Krishna's doing so many amazing pastimes, Mother Yasoda, she's missing out. Let us go and inform Mother Yasoda about all these beautiful pastimes that Krishna has been doing. So just as an excuse to talk about Krishna, just as an excuse to give these nice pastimes of Krishna to Mother Yasoda, they would come feigning anger and complain about Krishna's activities. We hear in the 10th canto Bhagavatam how all what Krishna used to do, he used to have spies among his friends. He'll delegate, okay, certain of his friends, okay, you go out and you look out and you spy on the house and you give me the signal when the owner of the house has left. So Krishna will send some spies, the spies will be out there hiding, and when the Mataji of the house, when the Prabhuji of the house, when they would leave the house to maybe go milk the cows or go somewhere else, and then the spies will come back and report to Krishna, okay, the coast is clear, we can come in now. And then Krishna and his friends, they would sneak into the house. And all these cowherd women, they had experience of Krishna stealing their butter and their yogurt, so they started hanging the butter very high up in the ceiling. So Krishna and his cowherd mates couldn't reach and steal the butter. So Krishna, he had a whole plan of how to steal the yogurt and the butter. Step 1 was they would pile up different crates or different, objects. Then all the cowherd boys, they would come like a human pyramid and Krishna would climb up. And then step 3, Krishna with a stick, he would make a hole into the pot of yogurt, pot of butter. And then step 4 was that after he cracked a hole into the butter pot, and as the yogurt would drip down, all the cowherd boys, they would take turns into going under the hole of the butter pot, and they all take turns eating the butter and the yogurt. So in this way, Krishna, he had a whole plan, whole system arranged in Vrindavan of how to steal butter, how to steal yogurt. Even if it was dark and there was no lights, it's mentioned that Krishna and Balaram's body, naturally being effulgence, just from their bodily effulgence, from the effulgence of the different ornaments, they would light up the whole room. And if by chance they didn't happen to find any yogurt or butter in the house, then Krishna, getting angry, he would go, Bhagavatam explains, sometimes he would go to the puja room of the householder and he would pass stool and urine in the puja room of the householder in anger. Or sometimes he would go and pinch the little babies in the house and make the babies cry. So in this way, Bhagavatam explains all these different things that Krishna used to do, and all the elderly gopis, when they would see all this, Krishna passing stool and urine in the puja room, Krishna making their babies cry by pinching them and all these different things, then naturally they go and complain to Mother Yasoda as an excuse to talk about Krishna. And my Guru Maharaj is mentioning that one detail, the Acharyas explained that when it's mentioned that, okay, Krishna's passing stool and urine in the puja room, Krishna's body is transcendental, so there's no such thing for him. Just for the sake of pastime, Krishna, he manifests things like this. And also another description is there of Mother Yasoda, as we hear in during Damodar month, when Mother Yasoda, she puts Krishna down and he goes on, when she goes to stir the milk or she attends to her duties in the kitchen, Bhagavatam explains that whenever Mother Yasoda would be in the kitchen cooking for Krishna, boiling milk, making butter, making yogurt, it's mentioned Mother Yasoda used to always sing different songs and poetry about the pastimes of Krishna. And Prabhupada, in his purport, he explains, it was custom back then, 5,000 years ago, that whenever someone wants to remember something, then they would get some professional poetry makers and they would ask a poetry wala to, I want these are the things I want poetry to be made. Can you please, compose a certain poetry, compose a certain song based on this? Or if they were expert themselves, then they themselves would compose poetry and songs, and they themselves would sing. So in this way, Mother Yasoda, either by getting some professional poetry makers to make some songs and poems about Krishna's pastimes, or by making up some songs herself, whenever she would be engaged in cooking for Krishna in the kitchen, as she would cook, as she would stir the pot, as she would engage in her different services in the kitchen, Bhagavatam explains, she would always be singing to herself the glories of Krishna. So in this way, if we analyze all the Vrajavasis that are there in the spiritual world, 24 hours a day they're engaged in hearing and chanting of Krishna. Even the animals and even the birds, beasts, insects, bugs, even inanimate personalities like the river, the trees, the grass, even all of them are also 24 hours engaged in Krishna Katha. There, we can see, there's one chapter in Krishna book, which again the gopis, I think it's the gopis who are reciting. They're talking about the glories of Krishna's flute. When Krishna, he blows his flute, and the transcendental sound of Krishna's flute comes, the gopis describe about the effect of the sound of Krishna's flute on all the residents from Vrindavan. The cows, they will be drinking, the calves, the little cows will be drinking milk from the udder of the mother, but as soon as they would hear the sound of Krishna's flute, halfway through drinking the milk, they would just stop. And the ears would go up and they would just freeze. Some movies, some hero would have some magic remote. If he presses the button, then he just freezes time and everyone will be frozen, So that's the effect that happens in Vrindavan. All animate living beings who are doing particular activities, they all just freeze as if time has just stopped. So the cows, they would be drinking milk and they would just freeze and they would just completely absorb themselves in hearing the sound of Krishna's flute. Some cows that would be eating the grass, they would just suddenly freeze and stop eating and just hear Krishna's flute. Birds that would be flying, they would come land on a branch and they would close their eyes and they would very attentively hear the sound coming from Krishna's flute. And inanimate personalities like trees, they would start becoming animated, which means the trees that are normally steady and still, not moving, they would start shaking in ecstasy. And sap, honey would start pouring from the pores of the trees in ecstasy from hearing about Krishna. So these are the different effects given in the Bhagavatam on different residents when they hear Krishna Katha, when they hear either Krishna's flute or topics about Krishna, or they hear words coming from Krishna's lotus mouth himself. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada, he writes in his purport that the sound of Krishna's flute is non-different from the holy name, is non-different from the Hare Krishna mantra. So just as all these residents of Vrindavan, as soon as they hear the sound of Krishna's flute, they just stop all activities and they just completely absorb themselves in hearing the transcendental sound from Krishna's flute. In the same way, we should imbibe that same mood of absorption when we're engaged in either reading Bhagavatam, when we are reading the Shastras. We should try and absorb ourselves in the verses and the purports. What is it that this verse is saying? What is it that Prabhupada is saying in these purports? When we're hearing a class, our mind shouldn't wander here and there. We should just simply absorb ourselves in what the speaker is trying to explain. When we're chanting Hare Krishna, we should absorb ourselves. We should stop our mind from wandering and just absorb ourselves in the transcendental nectar of the holy name. And this we can learn from the residents from Vrindavan. As I was explaining before, His Holiness Radha Maharaj, he was saying that if he was to choose one word to explain Krishna consciousness, then that one word would be absorption. And this we can see through the residents from Vrindavan, how when they would hear Krishna's flute, how they would just stop everything and anything and just completely focus on hearing the sound of Krishna's flute. That same level of absorption we should have whenever we are engaging our senses in any form of Krishna Katha, whether it's by reading Krishna Katha or hearing Krishna Katha or by chanting on our beats or by partaking in kirtan, any kind of Krishna Katha we engage in, we should try and go deep, we should try and absorb ourselves in that. Then we can qualify ourselves to also be part of the Nitya Leela in the spiritual world. There's one nice verse again in the Bhagavatam. It explains that the ears of the gopis, they were just like bird nests. And the holy name or the sound of Krishna's flute, it was like the bird coming and residing into the nest-like ears of the gopis. So just like you have a tree nest, and you can imagine a bird flying and coming back to the nest and then nicely taking shelter of the nest. So in the same way, when the gopis heard the sound of Krishna's flute, the nectar coming from Krishna's lotus mouth, their ears became like tree nests, and the sound of Krishna's flute was just like birds coming and residing into the nest-like ears of the gopis. And the second half of this verse in the Bhagavatam, it explains that when they were hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they didn't let any other sound vibration enter their ears. They just simply focused on that transform the sound from Krishna's flute, and they completely aloof themselves from any other sound vibration. So in that same mood of absorption, we should absorb ourselves when we are chanting the holy name. When we're chanting, we should chant with that same intensity. Let only the holy name of Krishna's mantra, only that sound vibration enter my ears. Let any other sound vibration that might be going around in the room or outside, or the sound vibration of my mind, we need to ignore that and just simply focus on Nam Prabhu and simply focus on the sound vibration. Either if it's Bhagavatam class, or either it's reading Prabhupada's books, or either if it's chanting the holy name. We should try and imbibe that same mood of absorption in any form of Krishna Katha we engage in. Okay, we'll stop here. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jo Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And Gaur Pramanande Hari Hari Bol.